If you are viewing this DC Bar Communities program after its original air date, there may have been changes to the information discussed during the presentation. The positions and opinions expressed by the speakers are strictly their own, and do not necessarily represent the views of their employers, nor those of the DC Bar, its Board of Governors, or co-sponsoring communities and organizations. Recording or distributing any part of this program in any form is strictly prohibited. Enjoy the program.
And good afternoon, everybody. My name is John Bowker, and I'm the practice group leader here at Arent Fox Schiff, and I'm also a proud former chair of the DC Affairs section of the DC Bar. On behalf of my partners, including former council member David Grasso, I am delighted to welcome you today to the firm for this exciting event. I want to begin by thanking our distinguished candidates for their participation. It's no small thing to stand for election for your community. Thank you for doing so. I want to thank our amazing journalists for their insights. At a time when the coverage of local news is shrinking, these journalists are keeping local reporting alive and thriving here in DC. I want to thank Jim, Ann, and the other members of the DC Affairs community for organizing this important discussion. And last but not least, I want to salute our staff at the firm, Alex, Kathy, Sarah, Julia, many others who have worked so hard to make this event a success. And I particularly want to thank all of you for showing up for DC and for our democracy and for being so engaged in the life of our city and our country. After this election, as you all know, we're going to have a new mayor, several new council members, and after 35 years, a new member of Congress. It was the honor and privilege of my life to work for our current member of Congress, Eleanor Holmes Norton. I actually started working for Eleanor 30 years ago, and now here we are 30 years later hosting a debate to choose her successor. It's hard for me to believe. She's been my professor, my boss, my mentor, and my friend. But most of all, she's my hero, and I know many of you feel the same way. Over the years, the Congresswoman has been responsible for the Revitalization Act that saved the district from bankruptcy, the DC TAG program that has sent thousands of DC residents to college, economic development projects such as the Yards, the Wharf, and of course, passage of the DC statehood bill twice in the US House of Representatives. But despite these accomplishments, we all know there are many challenges ahead. And I would argue that we're facing the greatest threats to the district's financial stability and democracy since the 1990s, when the Congresswoman negotiated the Revitalization Act with a Republican Congress, by the way, that not only lifted the district out of insolvency, but saved home rule. But as our new member of Congress faces these challenges of a struggling economy and federal interference in DC, you will all have a powerful tool to guide you: the enduring legacy of Eleanor Holmes Norton. She is a giant, the likes of which we may never see again, but we must all strive to emulate her example. So if any of you are so privileged to raise your hand to take the oath in the 120th Congress, I suggest every day you ask yourself a simple question: what would Eleanor do? What would Eleanor do? I ask myself that every day in my law practice, sometimes multiple times a day, and it has never failed me. And there isn't a day that goes by that I don't use something she taught me. It's a true gift she has given us all. So I wish our candidates the very best of luck. We DC residents are very proud of you. We're proud of your willingness to serve. And more importantly, we're counting on you. So once again, welcome to Arent Fox Schiff, and I hope you enjoy the debate. And now I'd like to introduce my friend and longtime bar communities leader and the moderator of today's debate, Jim Bubar. Jim.
Thank you and welcome everybody. We had 58 people registered for this program here. We have another 118 that are registered watching us on Zoom, and Esther Bushman, one of our co-chairs, has organized a very large panel at a retirement facility on Military Road. So welcome to all of you people who are watching us here and there, and as Colbert says, and all the ships at sea. So welcome. The format today is fairly simple, but let me go over the rules and then I'll introduce everybody. The race to succeed retiring Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton has been hotly contested. 20 people filed for their respective party nominations or as an independent. The DC Affairs community selected 5 candidates for this forum based on their qualification by the DC Board of Elections and financial filings with the Federal Election Commission. Each candidate will have a minute to introduce themselves and present opening remarks. After that, the reporters will have an opportunity to ask questions, and those candidates that wish to respond will have 30 seconds. If the reporters wish to follow up, the candidates will have an additional 15 seconds within which to respond. We'll alternate between the reporters. The reporters may ask specific questions to certain candidates, but in the spirit of cooperation, we ask that all candidates be given an opportunity to answer the question if they wish. Finally, since the purpose of this forum is to inform the voters about your issues, we would ask that each candidate address the questions that are put to them and refrain from addressing other candidates by name. After the reporters are finished, we'll open the questions up to the audience. We're asking those in the audience to submit their questions on index cards that will be collected from you, and those who are appearing remotely, put your questions in the chat and we'll have someone collect those as well. We'll ask as many questions as we have time, and then each candidate will have 30 seconds within which to wrap up. Now, let me introduce everybody. Our journalists are Michael Bryce Sadler, who covers DC politics for CityCast. Previously, he was part of a Pulitzer Prize winning team for public service reporting for the Washington Post. Martin Astromul is a reporter with the 51st. He previously worked for WAMU and the DCist. He has also written for the Washington City paper and other publications. And we have Denise Rolark Barnes, is the publisher of the Washington Informer. After graduating from Howard University School of Law, she chose to join her family news organization. And I want to welcome them. And they are longtime contributors to the DC Affairs community. And if you come back and watch our Meet the Press, they will answer the questions instead of asking them. Our candidates for City Council, we have Council Member Brooke Pinto, who's appearing remotely. Hi, Brooke. We have Council Member Robert White. Hi, Robert. We have Kenny Zalesny. Hi, Kenny. We have Trent Holbrook, and we have Kent Yasko, Dr. Greg Yasko. So without any further ado, we're going to jump into the program. They can introduce themselves in their 1-minute opening, and then the journalists can have at it with their questions. So we said we would let them speak in the order in which they showed up. So Kenny, go ahead with your minute, and we'll follow by Trent, then Mr. Yatsko, and then Brooke. You take it away from there. So please go ahead.
Great. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Kenny Zalesny. I'm running for Congress because Trump is crushing this city, and we need an experienced national fighter who knows how to push back. So quickly, by way of background, I've lived in this city for 30 years. I raised 4 kids here. I'm a Harvard-trained lawyer. In fact, I was a summer associate at this firm at Arent Fox in 1990. I worked in the Clinton White House. I was counsel to Janet Reno at the Justice Department. I ran a nonprofit in Adams Morgan that helped thousands of kids, DC kids, become the first in their families to go to college. I ran the strategy team at Microsoft. And in this last presidential cycle, I was a deputy national finance chair at the DNC and co-chair of Women for Kamala Harris. In all of those jobs, I fought and won new resources for Washington, D.C., and made lasting results. And I did that without sitting on D.C. Council, but I would put my record of results and resources up against anyone on this panel. Thanks. I look forward to the conversation.
Trent?
Great. Well, thank you. I'm Trent Holbrook, and for the past 8 years, I was on the front lines of every single major federal fight for DC's future, fighting side by side with Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton, including serving as her senior legislative counsel. When I started working for Congresswoman Norton, the DC statehood bill had been voted on only one time in American history in 1993, and it failed 2-1. They lost half the Democrats on the vote. I worked to make DC statehood the national issue that it is and that it deserves to be. We got over 100 national organizations to endorse the bill. I worked with those organizations, with DC residents, and with others, and we got a record number of co-sponsors on the bill. We took the bill from losing 2-1 in 1993 to passing in the U.S. House of Representatives twice for the very first time, and every single House Democrat voted yes for statehood. I've been the leader in Congress defending and advancing DC home rule. DC is under greater attack now than at any time, probably since enactment of the Home Rule Act in 1973. But there's a reason. It's because we're so very close to achieving DC statehood. It's because we put in the work and we made the advances on statehood, and now we're knocking at the door of equality for all of our residents in a way that we haven't before. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg.
Hi, my name is Greg Yatsko, and I'm a doctor, not a physician. I'm a physicist who came to Washington about 30 years ago to work on Capitol Hill. I worked for Ed Markey, a congressman then, and then Harry Reid, where I eventually went to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and was appointed chairman by President Obama in 2009. Since leaving government, I've worked in the private sector. I have a solar development company, and I do work with college students, getting them work and fellowships in the federal government. The reason I'm running in this race is because I think Trump is abusing the district. He's abusing federal workers. He's abusing the rule of law. And all of those things were unacceptable to me. And I watched as the Congress really did little to exercise its fundamental authorities and rights to make sure that the president would be held accountable for his actions. So when I look at the fundamental issues that face DC, of course, the biggest one is statehood. And this has been an issue that's existed for over 240 years. And I think it's time that we reset the narrative. So when I talk about statehood now, I focus on taxation. I think it's time that we stop paying federal income taxes in the district. And I will use all of my experience in government and in the private sector to make sure that the district is well represented. Thank you.
Okay, and appearing remotely is Council Member Brooke Pinto. Go ahead, please.
Thank you so much, DC Bar Foundation, and great to see you, Jim Bubar and John Bowker. And thank you to all of you for being really on the front lines of supporting our residents and protecting our city. The DC Bar Foundation has been a vital defense line for us, especially this year. And I'm so sorry that I'm not able to join you in person. I had a long-standing commitment this time, but did want to zoom in to say hello. I am the Ward 2 council member. I moved to DC initially to become a lawyer. I went to Georgetown for law school so I could learn the tools I needed to stand up for residents and to use the law to fight for fairness and justice, and absolutely fell in love with this city. I have been serving on the DC Council for the last 6 years, where I've been really focused on public safety, on growing our economy and supporting our small businesses and workplace opportunities, and investing in our young people and education. And I'm running to be our next congressional delegate, so DC can have a new full-time quarterback on behalf of our interests, both to defend the district against the unprecedented attacks from the Trump administration and from some congressional Republicans looking to undermine our autonomy and our safety and our growth and our jobs, but also to play better offense on behalf of the city and to secure billions of dollars from the federal government to use for our benefit locally to support our families, our parks, and our new industries. And so I am eager to continue what I've done my whole career, which is serve district residents, and appreciate the opportunity to join you all today.
Thank you, Brooke, and we hope that you can stay and answer some questions, but we understand if you have to leave for your other function. And now I'd like to introduce our final candidate, Councilmember Robert White.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody, and thank you to the DC Bar Foundation. I apologize for running in late. I went to my office to grab my keys, and there was the mother and grandmother of Tyel Coates, one of the young kids who was killed in the city last week, and they had not received support. And so obviously I could not just leave. I'm excited to be here with you today in this historic transition in our city. I grew up in the city. I'm a fifth generation Washingtonian. I have more family members of mine affected by gun violence than most of the sort of cerebral things that we deal with in politics too often. But I navigated my career in a different way after law school. I expected to go make some money and pay back my loans. Instead, I went to work for Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton to give back to my city, working on land transfers, judicial nominations, DC's statehood, DC's budget. So I understand our city and our city politics in a way that most people don't. I also understand that this is a time of opportunity for us. The redistricting battle that we won in Virginia last week was an indication of the fact that the country wants Democrats to take control of power. DC statehood is the way we do that, by adding those 2 Democratic senators. That's the work I'm going to do on the council and use that, in Congress, and use that seat to help stabilize our budget as well. I look forward to talking to you more today.
Okay, thank you. And I'd like to turn to the journalists, but before I do that, I want to acknowledge some people who are in the audience here. I'd like to acknowledge Ellen Jakovic, one of our outstanding former bar presidents. And I see we have some journalists who have been on our Meet the Press before, like Mr. Jaffe. And I know you may have some campaign staff here, so I acknowledge them. I also want to acknowledge the staff at Aaron Fox who are down here watching us, and the staff from the bar. And let's see, who am I missing? David Meadows, who's running on a slate called, announce your slate, David.
We're on a slate called Democrats United. It's for the seat Democratic.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else that I'm omitting here? Our former council member, Grosso was here. I think he had to step out, but now if I missed anybody, please forgive me. And now our distinguished journalists. So if we're going to do it based on who showed up first, I think, Michael, you camped out here earliest, so you can have the first question.
Thank you, James. And my first question is going to go to Councilmember Pinto. While we have you here, good to see you, Councilmember. I want to jump into what I think a lot of people have started to pay attention to in this race, which is last week you apologized for publishing some opposition research that included Councilmember White's home address and some other personal information. Could you please explain your rationale in publishing that information? What's your message to voters who have concerns about the information you published?
Sure. Well, thank you so much, Michael, for the question. I think that races need to be about our ideas and our vision for the future of the city. The information about Robert's family never should have been included in anything published. And as soon as I found out that it was, I had it removed immediately. I've apologized to Robert both publicly and privately. And it's not acceptable, period. It's not the way that I have run my life or any other campaigns. And we're really focused on these issues. I do think that voting and elections are about choices and ensuring that everybody does understand that our records are a big part of the differences of the candidates. And when you are a public official, you have a public record around your votes. And I think Robert and I and all the candidates have a different set of records. I've been really focused on public safety, on supporting our businesses, growing our economy, on making sure that our students have what they need to succeed. And so I want every voter and everyone in the room and beyond to know that is what I will stay focused on, and was very clear about that immediately as soon as I found out.
Thanks, Councilmember. And if you don't mind, Martin, I just want to go to Councilmember White to respond to that. And you did call for Councilmember Pinto to drop out of the race. Do you still feel that way?
I do still feel that way. We have a choice in DC as to whether or not our elections are going to go the direction of Trump and a lot of other folks who have gone to extremes. These are the types of things that make people not want to run for public office. I had someone tell me at an event last night that what happened to me last week was the exact reason she would never run for public office. If we want good people to stand up, look, all of us have, issues, but if we're going to stay on the issues that matter to voters, that's fair game. But, when you bring someone's, father, brother, wife into it, when you publish pictures of their home, that goes too far. That's not the way that we should be running or winning races, but that adds to the culture of elections going forward. And I think we have to take responsibility for what elections look like in this city. They shouldn't look like this. We want good people to run on ideas. That only happens if they don't get smeared. And I think we see examples in this country of what happens and some of the consequences of when things like that happen. So I take Brooke at her word that we're going to stay focused on the issues now.
And in the spirit of cooperation, does anybody else want to speak on this issue?
I would be happy to. Yeah, I think this is what you get when you have career politicians who are focused on their own ambition and focused on climbing on the next rung on the political ladder. You have people motivated by ego and ambition, and so they're focused on each other. They're fighting with each other when they get wounded in the battle. I'm not focused on my opponents. I'm focused on the issues of the people of DC and how we're going to fight against Trump. We have lost 43,000 jobs in the last year because of Trump's deliberate actions against our city. That's my fight. My fight is not with my colleagues.
Right, does anyone else want to say anything? Okay, then
I'll just say that I largely agree. And I think this is an unfortunate distraction. I don't think that voters care about this. And I think we're not focusing on the issues that matter. We're not focusing on DC statehood. We're not focusing on the fact that the president tried to federalize our Metropolitan Police Department. We're not focused on the fact that we have National Guard troops in the streets. And I think we need to focus on that and who have been the people who have actually been standing up every single day fighting these historic attacks on our democracy.
okay, Greg, did you want to say something?
No.
Okay, so let's go back to Brooke in the interest of fairness and let her have an opportunity to respond.
Well, thank you so much. I do just need to say, and I agree with my other colleagues who are saying, we should get back and focus on the issues, and this is just distraction. I think those are good points. I have to just say, though, this idea that I have brought this race into this ugliness is just wrong. And sometimes being a candidate and being a woman candidate feels a little like I get punched in the face every day by attacks, by lies. And we have shared the record, and now it's being portrayed that I should drop out of the race. I think that's just a inaccurate portrayal of what has gone on the last 6 months. But I have been saying we should be focused on the issues. We don't need to be spreading lies about my family. And so I do sincerely apologize for anything that was put up about Robert's family, because again, that's not my nature. Even though it's been what's been happening to me, it is not who I am and not what my race is about. But I do just need to say that I am going to stay focused on what I've done my whole career, which is fighting for our residents. But I cannot just accept those comments that we have brought the race in that way. It's just not true, and it's not right.
Okay, thank you very much, Council Member. And let's turn to our next journalist for another exciting question, Martin Astermule.
Well, since Michael got to address the elephant in the room, I get to do the high-minded focus on just the issues now, of course. Just kidding. You all at some point mentioned statehood, and it's obviously a lot of DC residents were very, very excited when the House voted on the bill. I forget how many years ago, but within the last 5 years or so, it was a historic moment. We're in a very different moment right now. There's a very different Congress, a very different brand of Republicans, but even some Democrats. So how would you realistically convince, not just Republicans, but even some Democrats that statehood is the way to go? And we can figure that if Democrats take the House, it can pass the House again. The Senate is where it's going to get stuck. So how would you specifically convince wavering senators that statehood is right? Like, what is your strategy realistically, and how would you describe that to a normal voter?
Is it one for me?
Oh, no, it's meant for everybody, but Trent, if you want to get started.
Sure. I would just start on that since I worked on the DC statehood bill for the past 8 years. So as I mentioned, I worked with Congressman Norton, and we got a record number of co-sponsors on the bill, and we got every single House Democrat the second time that it came up to vote yes for statehood. And this includes Democrats who had previously voted against the bill in 1993. It's because we put in the hard work. We went door to door. We talked with members of Congress. We talked with their staff. We persuaded them. As I said, too, we got over 100 national organizations to endorse the bill, and I can't tell you how critical that was, because it's important to have League of Women Voters, for example, saying that, hey, Congressmember, whatever, you should co-sponsor this, and also have League of Women Voters of Nevada saying that you should co-sponsor this. And so really truly making it a national issue, working with the partners that you have is absolutely critical. And then also calling out every single time that we get attacked and using that as an opportunity to further pursue DC statehood and increasing our autonomy.
Yeah, Greg, I say Greg, and then we can go from there. I think.
Sure. So, I think, as I said in the opening, this has been an issue that's been around for over 240 years. So it's not as if we just recognize that statehood is a problem. So, I think a lot of work has been done, certainly at the legislative side, to focus on statehood, but we're not really making that much progress realistically. And as you mentioned, the Senate will be a roadblock. I mean, I worked in the Senate for a number of years and understand the different challenges that you have getting legislation passed in the Senate. And it's in particular in the Senate where the realities of 2 additional senators are more resonant, because that really has a significance in changing the balance of power. So that will be a political challenge for sure. So what I think we need to do is, number one, we need to start making some actual progress. And I think that comes in the form of federal income taxes. One of the unique aspects of the district is that we have federal income tax obligations, unlike other territories in the US. And I think, quite frankly, I think that's an issue where Republicans will be supportive of something like that. And so you have the ability to recognize the differences with the district by implementing a policy that exempts the district from federal income taxes. And I think that resets the narrative in the debate so that people then begin to ask, why is DC not paying federal income taxes? And it gives a motivation then to talk about statehood. Okay.
Just real quick, and Trent can probably get back to this one too. While you're answering your questions, just maybe also answer the question what Dr. Jasko just raised. Do you support exempting DC from federal income taxes? Trent, and then we'll go through the rest of you.
I don't. And one of the main reasons it's a very persuasive argument. We pay all of our federal income taxes. We fought and died in every single war since the American Revolution. We pay more taxes per capita than any state in the country, and we pay more overall than half the states. You have to have those arguments, and we want to be the equals of the states, and that's how we do it.
All right. So can you both the statehood question, how to get there, and also the taxation question?
Great. Okay. I think the statehood strategy is 3 parts, and I recognize that this is a little unorthodox. So number one, we have work to do in this district to garner support for statehood. I know that if you poll people, it'll say 90% support statehood, but that doesn't mean we all prioritize it. So, and having lived here for 30 years and been a candidate for 8 months, I can tell you that there are people in this city with power who do not really think they need statehood. And there are people in this city with no power who do not think statehood will help them. So there's this very active middle, and it's bigger than it used to be, but it's not big enough. We need every DC citizen to be a soldier in this fight with everyone they talk to across the country to really get the groundswell of support. Okay, so that's inside the city. Second, we need to elevate the priority of this issue among our Democratic allies and partners. That's in the party itself. It's across members of Congress in both houses. And I know we can do it. I know there is a lot of room to educate our allies and partners. I was a deputy national finance chair at the DNC. I know a lot of the Democratic House members and their leadership. I was just endorsed by 3 House members representing the left, right, and center of the Democratic Party. I have these relationships, the breadth and depth of them across the party, and we need to elevate our case. And then we pick off Republicans. We make a few that we'll need to get past the filibuster. We need a grand bargain that gives us something and gives them something.
Councilmember White.
Thank you for the question. Look, DC should be a state because it's the right thing to do, but that's not why DC will get statehood. We will get statehood now because we're going to focus on our friends. Republicans will not support statehood. We can't bury our heads in the sand, pretend that reality isn't reality, and hope that somehow magically we get statehood. That's not where it is. We get statehood because we pour into this window of opportunity historically. The reason we just redistricted in Virginia and redistricting fights are happening across this country is about political power. So while the folks, Democratic Party won't support DC statehood because it's the right thing to do, they will support it to expand Democratic power. I believe that this is the argument to get us to the top of their priority. Again, not the reason we should be getting statehood, but it is the thing that will work. We're also going to use organizations that support me. The Congressional Black Caucus, the largest historic caucus, which just endorsed me. Senator Warren, who endorsed me last week. We need members of the Senate. Free DC, which has blown like wildfire to drive in residents. These are the keys to our success right now, but we have a limited window of opportunity. We need somebody who knows how to use it.
All right, Councilmember Pinto.
Great, thank you so much. So I think over the last decade or so, there's been a difference of argument with Republicans saying, for the most part, of course, we're not going to give you statehood because you'll have 2 Democratic senators. And a lot of Democrats saying, well, it's not really just about that. It's about autonomy. It's about control of DC's budget. It's about making sure things are fair. I think we need to be bullish that absolutely, yes, we are going to get 2 Democratic senators. And that's why it should be the #1 policy priority on the DC Democratic Party platform. I just spoke to Ken Martin about this on Sunday. It's why I just spoke to the DC Young Democrats across America to ensure that every chapter is prioritizing this as their #1 issue. I want to build on the legacy of not only Eleanor Holmes Norton, but also Walter Fauntroy, who went around the country building coalitions. There's been a lot of conversation about money raised this week. Part of the reason that I want to raise money for this seat is so that I can go around the country supporting other Democrats who advance and stand behind statehood and making sure that we do not support candidates, regardless of their party, who are not going to be strong pro-statehood partners. And we're going to build that coalition throughout America to advance statehood. We cannot only focus on what's happening.
Councilmember, I hate
here.
to interrupt you, but you're at time.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now we turn to Denise Rolark Barnes.
Thank you very much. And it's an honor to be here to ask you all questions. See who our next member of Congress is going to be. And speaking of that, Mayor Bowser has been criticized for the way in which she has interacted with the Trump administration. And you're running for a seat that has no vote, but yet you're going to have to build relationships with a Republican-controlled Congress. Have you thought about, and what will be your approach to dealing both with the Trump administration and members of Congress, particularly those on the other side, to ensure that you can either follow the legacy, complete the legacy of Congresswoman Norton, or get some other main initiatives for the District of Columbia? And Robert, I'll start with you.
Thank you. So what we have to do is build on the legacy of Congresswoman Norton, not mimic it. The reality is, when one of us gets sworn into the next Congress, we had better have a Democratic-controlled Congress. We should not be dealing with a Republican-controlled Congress. My work after the primary, if we win the primary, is not going to start when I get sworn in. It's going to start the day after the primary to mobilize all of these angry and frustrated DC residents who want to protect their neighborhood, their kids, their jobs, or democracy, to go into swing districts to make sure that Democrats control the majority and then be aggressive with our agenda, 1 for DC, but 2 for the nation. We also have to make sure there are consequences for people who vote against DC. We have to continue to mobilize into the districts of the folks who step on DC, because right now there are 0 consequences for voting to harm DC, which is one of the reasons we continue to see Republicans consistently vote against DC and handfuls of Democrats. And when I talk to them, most Republicans and Democrats are sympathetic, but they're stuck between the congressional politics and the White House politics, and DC is not a factor. So we have to make DC a factor.
I've heard this idea several times at these forums about taking busloads of DC voters to swing states to help knock doors so that the new junior House members will support DC statehood. I think it's I think it's a fine idea. I think the DCCC is going to send 50 organizations there, so I'm not sure we're actually going to be recognized for DC's participation or win any loyalty to the DC statehood cause. I think a better idea is we are one of the biggest tourist attractions in the country. Instead of taking DC voters to other districts to fight for statehood, why aren't we doing a public education campaign right here? Why isn't it on the walls of our airport, of Union Station, on the sides of our buses? You know, welcome to DC. We're the last colony. Or welcome to DC. We still don't have a vote, or whatever the PR experts come up with. But there is so much we can be doing to win people to this cause that we just haven't been doing. And blame the current leaders who have a lot of rhetoric but haven't done these things, haven't put money behind a public education campaign like that. It could make a huge difference.
So Congresswoman Norton has always said that she spent the majority of her time in Congress being in the minority. And so despite that, she has always consistently been ranked as one of the most effective lawmakers on Capitol Hill, and frankly, probably one of the most effective lawmakers in American history. And the reason is because she knows the legislative process. She's been part of the process. She knows it from A to Z. And I've been working with her for the past 8 years, also learning about that process. And what we've done is we've used every single opportunity that we could to advance DC priorities. And so you can take something that's absolutely horrible that's happened to DC, so think January 6th or the clearing of Lafayette Square, and use those horrible things to advance priorities for DC, like using those to pass in the House of Representatives the District of Columbia National Guard Home Rule Act, which if enacted would be the largest expansion of home rule since 1973. So the critical thing in this is you do have to know how to work with Republicans. Like for example, when we worked with Congressman Comer, the chair of the Oversight Committee on the RFK land transfer, but also knowing that you have to stand up every single time with every single fight to fight every anti-home rule attack that comes our way. And you have to have that experience and know how to do that.
Because I'm last. Going back, as I heard the question was really how to deal with the Trump administration and then obviously Republicans in Congress. And I think this comes down to a moral question. I think there is a point at which you want to work with the opposing party to advance issues that are important for the district, for the country as a whole. Not everything is just about the district. But I think fundamentally the president is not good for the country as a whole. And I think you have to take a stand at some point and say, you cannot work with a president who violates the law, who violates the Constitution. And I think that Congress has an obligation, as politically unpalatable as it may be, to stand up and say it's time for impeachment. And I recognize that can make it more challenging to deal with some of the issues, for instance, bike lanes on 15th Street or reducing DC tags funding. But at some point as a country, we have to recognize the moral moment that we're in. And it requires recognizing that the person in the White House is not a person that can be trusted. He is not a person to negotiate with. He is a person to be impeached, quite frankly. And I think that that's difficult, but it's the reality of how we have to move forward. I'll stop there.
Thank you. And we can go reverse order this time for my question. DC often loses Democratic support in Congress on criminal justice issues. How do you change the narrative so that DC policy is treated as a home rule issue and not a national political wedge?
Yeah, so again, I think this gets back to the fundamental question of the implications for statehood. So, no other jurisdiction in the country has a federal entity that can interfere with what are fundamentally local decision-making processes. So many issues of crime, of justice in this city get federal interference. You take, for instance, the DC bar, the federal judge. We have a vacancy right now on federal and DC judgeships because those judges go through Senate confirmation. That's one piece, one issue that, again, I think we need to work on to try and pull that back and have those judges appointed by a council or a commission set up in the district. So, there are always going to be these little issues that we will always have to fight. But ultimately, the final solution is to get DC statehood and ultimately achieve that goal. And as I said, I think the best way to do that is to reset the narrative and focus on income taxes and really get people to recognize how the district is different. And then we don't have to fight those issues and we can actually work on proactive legislation that deals with the massive disparities in wealth that we have between Ward 7 and 8 and the rest of the city, for instance.
I think education's key, like you said. I think so many people, even members of Congress, do not understand what DC is, and they will use DC as a pawn in every single opportunity that they come to. So if you look at the debate that we had over the DC's revised Criminal Code Act, DC spent a decade rewriting its criminal laws in a way that pretty much every other state in the country had done. The only thing that got talked about in Congress was carjacking over and over. And so reframing the argument and saying, we are 700,000 people, we pay taxes, all the things I raised earlier, and educating members of Congress and saying, we're just like you, we should not have our laws overturned, but also we should bring back home rule authority. We should have control over our courts. We should be able to have senatorial courtesy on judges. We should have all these local things just like everybody else because we're the same as everybody else, and just educating people over and over, which is what we've been trying to work on for the last several years.
Yeah, I think you're going to see pretty broad agreement across all of us on the need for legislative autonomy. I told you before my background, my professional background. I've had jobs where I've had power, like the White House, the Justice Department, Microsoft. I've had jobs where I've had no power, like growing a tiny nonprofit in Adams Morgan to help thousands of DC students go to college. What I learned is that when you don't have formal power, like when you are DC on Capitol Hill, the way you get things done is by recruiting allies and partners to your side. It's the only way. You have to make yourself bigger because you don't have the formal power yourself. Recruiting allies and partners is my superpower. And that's what I've been doing for 30 years in the public sector, the nonprofit sector, the private sector. We have relationships. There are Democratic leaders across the House and across the Senate who are not aware enough of our plight. I have the relationships and the alliances to help drive that harder, to advocate better, to win more friends and allies. And that's how we preempt some of the dirty tricks they play with our legislation.
So there are a couple things that have to happen. First of all, we can't break ranks on home rule locally. You can't have the council say one thing and the mayor say another thing. That gives a permission slip to anybody who's on the fence to go against DC. So as the leader of the federal strategy, as DC's delegate, I'm going to meet at least monthly with the mayor, the council chair, and the attorney general to make sure any disagreements we have are over breakfast, lunch, or drinks. But out in public, we are on one page. Then in Congress, we are going to lobby aggressively with leadership, utilizing partly that leverage of deploying DC residents into swing districts. I briefed actually Congressman Jamie Raskin on this idea, and Kenny, he thought it was a really good idea. In fact, he said it reminded him of his Democracy Summer program, which he said has made him a lot of friends in Congress. And I also asked him in that meeting, why we only had 5 Democrats vote against DC in the most recent vote when we had 25, 30 previously. He said, because we've done a better job of educating members in the caucus and whipping votes. We have to continue that. We're starting to see some progress, but we need this to be consistent.
So I wanted to address a word that isn't often used or tossed around in Washington anymore, which is compromise. And it's actually something that Delegate Norton, for as passionate as she was, she did compromise. I mean, we mentioned the Revitalization Act. She negotiated with Republicans to make sure there were some benefits to DC there. So I'm curious how each of you as a DC delegate would work compromise into your strategy, even if it involves difficult decisions about giving up something that DC has to avoid getting something worse from, let's say, Republicans if they still control the House or control the Senate. Say they come to you and say, there is a bill to do this. We want to knock down the age at which juveniles can be charged as adults from the current, where it is 18 essentially down to 14. Now, would you say, listen, we can't do 14, but we'll give you 16 and 17-year-olds, we'll allow them to be charged as adults for more crimes than currently? I'd like you to address this issue of like, how much would you compromise? And do you have a red line, like a line at which point you're going to say, no, we can't compromise anymore?
So why don't we start with Robert and work down?
So look, this is one of the reasons it is so important that the person who go into the seat understand this city fully. You don't know what it is to have people charged if you haven't had people in your family charged with crime. So there are some things we should not compromise on, right? I was with Congresswoman Norton when we got this close to having a vote in the House. The only problem was the compromise that they wanted was to get rid of all gun control laws in DC. And she said that is a bridge too far, we will not compromise. Years later, to get the wharf, which was one of the economic development projects I led with her on, We had to work with Republicans in the Republican House and a Republican Senate to get that done, required compromise. That was a place you could compromise. So our delegate needs to understand this city front to back, top to bottom, and what each of these compromises would mean, and have the backbone to not make the compromise when it's not necessary. Now, one of the things that my colleague brought up is my record. Look at my record. What it says is, I am not an ideologue. I recognize that you have to have a North Star, but there are some things you got to compromise on, and sometimes you just got to do the hard thing. That's what I've done on the council. That's what I'll do in Congress.
Well, I think there's a difference between being willing occasionally to compromise and regularly flip-flopping on positions. But I would say as a legislator, of course, you need to have some capacity for compromise. It's not an emperorship, much as our president might not understand that. Like, of course, you advance positions, you listen to other people's positions, you try to come to common ground. That's the job. So I think that's, and I think throughout my career, I have worked with every kind of person, public sector, private sector, nonprofit sector, and political parties. I have worked at every level with those kinds of people. I mean, you get so much more done when you listen carefully. You have to be very clear about your goals, and then you get the best deal you can. And I would say quickly, on statehood in particular, there are so many measures we could benefit from on the way to statehood: legislative autonomy, budget autonomy, control of the National Guard, a vote on the House floor. I don't see those as compromises, but I see them as strategies to advance to the North Star, which is statehood.
Sure, I largely agree. I think there are absolutely some things you should try to compromise on and work with Republicans on. But when it comes to home rule, if it's, negotiating DC's law should be 14 or 16 or whatever that number should be, that should be for the DC Council. That should be for our own elected officials. And so I would never compromise when it comes to DC home rule. And I take Congresswoman Norton's position that no matter what DC does, even if I completely disagreed with what DC did, the government did, I would defend it as a matter of home rule and as a matter of basic democracy. So on those things, you can't compromise. And when you start to lose more and more Democrats whenever that happens. And so you have to be crisp, you have to be clear. And on these types of things, you have to make two arguments. And that's the way that we've been doing it. You make the argument for home rule. We're 700,000 people, like I said, but at the same time, you also have to defend whatever policy that the DC Council came up with, which is unfortunate. We shouldn't have to do that, but you always have to defend it completely. And so on that, I wouldn't compromise. But on other things, if it's trying to bring resources into DC, which Congresswoman Norton has been the expert at, absolutely, you do what you can to try to bring the resources in that are necessary. Like I said, she was one of the most effective lawmakers in Congress, and it's because she knew how to do that and how to use every single opportunity for DC.
Yeah, so I agree with certainly a lot of things my colleagues have said. I think one of the biggest challenges in politics today in this country is that we have confused the idea with centrism with compromise. And I think Congress functions best when you have people with very disparate ideas coming together to find solutions for the country, for the district, for whatever group you're trying to represent. So a big part of the work that I've done throughout my career, in particular when I was at the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, was to deal with compromise. I'll give you two very brief examples. One, after the 9/11 terrorist attacks, there was a strong movement to try and put in place programs to protect existing nuclear power plants against aircraft attack. And I looked at that issue and I said, that's just not something that's going to be possible. But a compromise that we could achieve would be to actually impose that requirement on new plants that would be built in the future. And that was a compromise that took conversations with a very powerful industry, working with my colleagues on the commission, both Republicans and Democrats, and we achieved that goal. On the flip side, when it came to licensing some of those new reactors, there were requirements that should have been put in place to deal with an accident in Japan, a Fukushima nuclear power plant accident. The commission not want to impose that. That for me was a red line. In fact, I opposed those new licenses because that was a point that I did not think I could compromise on. So at the end, it comes down to your experiences and your ability to make those decisions throughout. Thanks.
Great, thank you. And Denise?
Yeah, thank you. Trent, I'm going to start with you. And anybody else that wants to respond to this, feel free. Representative Scott Perry of Pennsylvania has led a congressional effort for passage of the Stop DC Camera Act. And that specifically targets the removal of 500 plus active traffic enforcement cameras. The bill would also overturn a recent DC regulation that bans right turns on red lights. The Congressional Budget Office estimates the district could lose roughly $300 million annually, and Mayor Bowser contends that removing the cameras would endanger district residents. Of course, many residents don't like those red light cameras, so and are very critical of them as well. But if I want to know your opinion of this legislation, I'm sure you were there, and you know what impact this will have on district residents if it passes.
Sure. No, I really appreciate that question because sometimes you feel alone in Congressman Norton's office defending our traffic laws in Congress. It's insane. And so we used every opportunity like that to point out just how crazy some of these anti-home rule things are. Should, 435 members of the House and 100 members of the Senate be spending their time dealing with right-hand turn on red laws in the District of Columbia? And should their constituents be happy if they're spending time dealing with right-hand turn on red? So we fought this every step of the way. And the problem is it's not just one bill that does it. They also attach these types of things to the appropriations bill. And so those are the types of things that we've had to fight against every single day for the past 8 years. And we've been very successful with it. We had a record number of anti-home rule attacks this Congress, over 100 so far, with bills, amendments, and things like that, and had a record number of amendments attached to the House version of the House Appropriations Bill, including the traffic ones. And we fought each one of them, and we knew how to fight them, and they're not law now, largely because of the work that we put in on them.
Yeah, I'd like to, so I have 4 kids, ages 18 to 23. They share our cars. I think our family has been one of the major contributors to that 300 million revenue stream. So I'm not personally a fan of the new surveillance. But if this is what DC decides, then for sure it should be our local law. And I appreciate, Trent, your work and the Congresswoman's work fighting back a lot of those riders. And this is the heart of the problem. We should have legislative autonomy. If this is the will of the DC people, then it shouldn't be overturned by Congress.
So I have an issue that we have to balance our budget on traffic cameras. That is not the purpose of those cameras. But it struck me relatively early in my tenure in Norton's office. We went to meet with the Library of Congress, because Congresswoman Norton was pissed that there was not a stained glass window with DC's flag like the rest of the states. And as I sought to understand why we were spending time on stained glass windows in the Library of Congress that maybe 2 people might notice, what I realized was in talking to her, you can't let any issue of home rule inequality go. Otherwise, you have already started to lose. So even if I hate the cameras and the tickets and DC balancing its budget, the delegate has to defend all the way every single home rule issue, even the ones they don't like. And that's what I will do as our delegate.
Yeah, I would say I would agree with everyone. I also hate the cameras. I think it seems to be consensus up here. So, and as others say, that's not the point. The point is that DC should have the ability to make those kinds of decisions. Whether they're right or wrong, it's up to the DC residents to decide. So I would equally fight any of those efforts in Congress to implement those. And again, I think it is important, this issue of education and talking to members and also getting members, constituents who are not in the district to understand that this is what certain members are putting their time and effort into, is introducing legislation to ban traffic cameras in the District of Columbia, rather than dealing with issues like, wealth inequality in this country. We have a war in Iran right now, which the Congress does not seem to want to actually get engaged in. Those are the issues that their representatives should be working on, not DC traffic cameras and right turn on red.
Thank you. I want to return to Dr. Jasko and your idea about DC taxpayers stop paying federal income taxes as a leverage move for statehood. It's interesting. I don't think everyone had a chance to say whether they would agree with that, but more importantly, how do you make sure that's executed or argued in a way that doesn't open up residents to some kind of legal liability? We are at the DC bar, or just make the Congress more hostile toward the city and its residents?
Well, I think number one, the Congress is hostile to the district. So I don't think at some point we can pretend that it's not. we've just talked about issues. They're interfering in traffic issues. They're interfering in so many issues in the district. There's National Guard troops all over the district. We have federal law enforcement that is engaged in activities that should be local law enforcement. So there already is antagonism to the district. So I think there's two ways you do this. Number one, introduce legislation. I think that's the most straightforward way to do it. And the second is an act of civil disobedience. I think there certainly would potentially be consequences, although I think there was a Wall Street Journal article published, I think last week, that said that enforcement at the IRS is essentially zero. So maybe the implications would not be that strong. A third way to approach it is you could look at setting up some type of fund within the district where those taxes would be deposited in some type of escrow fund until the district decides then to release those. So I think there's a number of ways to do it, but fundamentally it is an act of civil disobedience. And I think it's reflective of the realities that we are dealing with what is a civil rights issue in the district. And so that might need a degree of civil disobedience. But I also think you get a lot of businesses and Republicans that might like it as a good option. So I think you have prospects actually to pass legislation to do it.
I just want to say the escrow fund is the way to do it. If we're going to do it, we can't just withhold the taxes. So we'd have to put them aside and be available. I think we should find out what DC voters think about this. I don't think we've done a clear, an actual serious survey about that option. And I would want to know what the people of DC think, because it's a bold move. Well, it won't save us any money if we put the money in escrow, so we have to do that. It's a bold move. It could draw interesting attention. It could be dangerous. And I'd like to know what the DC voters think.
Do you support it?
Do I support
The idea of withholding?
I'm not without that kind of research, and certainly not without an escrow fund. I think I think the risks likely outweigh the benefits, but I'd be interested to know what the voters think, because I would be open to changing my mind on that.
And I would not support that. If we want to be a state, we need to continue to look more and more like a state. That would make us look more like a territory. Already, there are enough people who don't understand the difference between, say, Puerto Rico and DC. This is one of the reasons that I believe our next delegate has to assume more of a national profile, because people can't support an issue or a place that they don't understand. So I want people to understand DC, but one of the things they need to understand is we are the only ones that pay federal taxes that don't have the same full rights of democracy here.
All right. Well, given the answers to the last two questions, I want to see tax returns and traffic tickets from all of you before the end of the day. One thing, again, coming back to Delegate Norton, I mean, obviously, given the history that she's had in the city, statehood wasn't her goal for the longest time. I think she recognized that it wasn't possible, so she negotiated a lot of other things. I mean, most recently, there was this potential compromise with Utah to get Utah an additional seat and the district a seat just in the House. So I'm curious how each of you would approach those sort of creative compromises to get DC something, but not the whole thing. Would you consider some sort of arrangement where it's just a seat in the House, but nothing in the Senate, a voting seat in the House? Would you consider, this is probably a little step further, but I mean, Republicans every now and again say just retrocede to Maryland and the problem resolves itself. There's now a new idea, a little different, that Republicans want to re-retrocede or unretrocede Arlington and Alexandria back into the district, which I don't think we've ever found an issue that Republicans and some DC residents would probably agree on, but here we are. So I'm just curious about creative things that you would do that would get DC something, but maybe not the full statehood. And let's start with Trent.
Sure. No, I think you're right. I think Congresswoman Norton, had the right approach on this. We took a two-pronged approach in her office. So on the one side, you're always fighting for DC statehood, and we made record progress on that because of the arguments that we did over and over and over. And on the other side, you advance DC home rule. So like I said, we use horrible events in our history or good events and try to bring greater autonomy to DC, trying to get control over the National Guard, trying to not have the president be able to federalize our police department, those types of things. As far as the retrocession idea, either way, whichever way it works, no, I wouldn't support that. DC residents don't want to be part of Maryland. We voted in 2016, I think it was 90% of DC residents supported DC statehood. We're very clear on this issue. We think that we're the equal of everybody else, and we don't want to go back into Maryland. We haven't been part of Maryland for 200 years. Nobody wants that. And also, one thing on that as well is if retrocession is constitutional, if Republicans think that that's constitutional, then so too is DC statehood. And so that's what I would try to argue is you just ceded the whole argument. They said for years and years and years that DC statehood is unconstitutional. Well, if you can do these other things, then DC statehood is also constitutional because it's the exact same constitutional provisions and same constitutional reasoning.
Yeah, well, I think I've made clear how I would tackle this issue. I think it's to deal with the income tax issue, but I think there's the retro session, whatever we call it, does raise interesting questions about the stability of statutory statehood. I think this is probably an open constitutional question, and maybe there's somebody in the audience who can deal with it, or maybe we've got lots of lawyers up here that have a good sense of this, but it does raise the question of whether ultimately a statutory statehood would be a lasting statehood, that if you always have the ability for the Congress to redraw whatever the boundary of that state is, then that becomes a challenge. I think, like I said, I think it does tend to lead you to think that the ultimate solution is to do constitutional statehood, which has gotten close. Of course, Congress has passed constitutional statehood, but it was never ratified, or at least full representation in Congress in the 60s, but it was never ratified by the states. So, certainly it is a possibility. But as I said, I think the real way to do it is we start dealing with the tax issue. We focus on the taxation part of no taxation without representation.
So I'm an adjunct professor at Georgetown Law, and one of the things I tell my students is when there's a window of opportunity, take it, because it will not last. And so I'm going to fight for statehood. I actually think we have opportunities to get to statehood that we have never had before, and we have to seize on it. But if the opportunity for legislative autonomy or budget autonomy comes up, I'm going to take it. The opportunity for a vote on the floor for full representation just in the House comes up, I'm going to take it. If I see an opportunity to create a delegate in the Senate, I'm going to take it. Any incremental piece of power to bring DC closer to full democracy, I'm going to take it. But the entire time, I'm going to fight for full statehood, because nothing short of that will be fair to us in DC.
Yes, that is the list that I regularly tout, and I would just add to it control of the National Guard. Like all of those measures, if we can get them, we should. I want to say something about this recent bill proposed to make DC square again, right? To give us back the parts of Virginia that we lost a century ago. It's not going to pass, but it's good for us just to seed the idea, because the premise of the bill is that no changes are ever allowed to DC. So we don't want it to pass, and it won't. But what's going to happen is it's going to trigger this conversation that suggests that we can change the borders, and that's like an opening of the mind in America that we need to happen if we're going to advance DC statehood. So I'm kind of encouraged, even though it's a nasty and hostile bill and meant to punish Virginia Democrats for what they did yesterday in redistricting. But I think it could have good effects on the conversation about DC statehood.
We'd also get a second Costco, but that's beyond.
There you go. That's the top priority. All right. That's part of the platform I think we all share.
As long as there's no traffic cameras between there and.
I think I can honestly say that most district residents have no relationship or engagement with Capitol Hill, with the exception of those who have to work, lobby, their jobs require them to go there. But the average district resident has no relationship and may not even clearly understand how, Congress is impacting our lives. Congresswoman Norton was really good, I'll say, at meeting with the community, talking to the community. I'm not sure how much she heard, but I know she talked to the community quite often. So I want to know, under your leadership, how will you ensure that district residents, regardless of ward, feel seen, heard, and represented on the federal level? What would be your outreach? And I'm going to start with you, Kenny, because you kept saying, I want to hear what the residents have to say.
Okay, great. No, I appreciate it. So one of the first things I will do as delegate is open a constituent services office in Ward 7 or 8. Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton used to have one in Ward 8, but it closed. And the only constituent services office she has now is like near the White House, which is not super convenient to most of the 700,000 of us who would like to access constituent services. So I will open an office east of the river to be sure that everyone in every neighborhood and every ward knows that we have a delegate on the Hill, that she is available to them, that she is helping to funnel federal resources to their families, to their neighborhoods, to their schools, to the whole city. And so that's a high priority of mine. I also want to meet regularly and volubly and all the time with people in DC. I have loved doing it as a candidate. I have been so gratified by the warm reception I get in every neighborhood, in every ward, and it's a huge part of how I will lead as delegate.
Yeah. So I'm a little off right now because just before I came here, there was an 8-month pregnant woman in my office because her 14-year-old son had just been killed. She was brought to my office by somebody else who had gone to my office for help and said, "This is the guy who will help you." Folks in DC know that I will help. As delegate, that won't change. I will continue to be in community so people know who I am. But it's also important for people to understand why the delegate seat matters so much. So in addition to being in communities the way that I have been as a council member, we are going to use our home field advantage to introduce our young people to Congress, but also introduce Congress better to DC. I want to make sure we're working with every school so that we always have groups of students going around the Capitol, talking to other members to educate them on DC. This is a level of education and visibility that we haven't achieved. But a good friend of mine told me when Congress took $1 billion of our money last year, he said, "Robert, don't forget that you have home field advantage." And I thought about what that meant and how we use it. And now I know exactly what he meant.
Yeah, I would just say that I've had to do a number of things in government. So I worked as a Senate staff for Senator Harry Reid in Nevada. And one of the issues that I actually did for him was make sure that he was reaching out to all of the communities across the state. He was a Democrat in what was at the time a fairly purple state. So part of what I would do was take trips to go to Elko, Nevada, to go all across the state, not just Las Vegas, and meet with community groups, meet with local elected officials to understand what their priorities were, to help Senator Reid then make sure that those communities got the resources, got the federal support that they needed. So it's the kind of approach I will bring to this job as well. It's much easier to do here in the district because the district is a lot smaller than the state of Nevada. The other way that I've done this was when I was the head of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. One of my jobs is to go visit nuclear power plants. And typically the chairman would not meet with people other than plant executives. But I made a point of actually meeting with local elected officials, community groups, and others when I did those visits because I wanted to understand what their perspectives were. And I will just close by saying listening is important, but action is equally important. You have to do more than just go and listen. You have to find things that you can actually accomplish because that builds the trust with the community that's important so that they will eventually reach out and you build more and more of a relationship. Thank you.
All right, it's now 1:13. It's time now to take.
Can I just
I'm
answer
sorry.
that question? Sorry.
I'm sorry.
So-
After you finish.
Yeah, sure. So meeting with constituents was a huge part of my job for the last 8.5 years with Congresswoman Norton. And Congresswoman Norton always introduced more bills than any other member of Congress. Every other member of Congress, save one, who introduced crazy number in the last Congress for some reason, but she was always number 1 or 2 is the point. And so many of our bill ideas came from us meeting one-on-one with constituents. They would bring a problem, they bring something we had never even thought of, never considered, and we would research and introduce a bill on that. And large part of that is because we have so many federal employees here, so that's part of it. And so many other issues that come through on that. And also dealing with constituent services directly. So I handled justice issues for the office. And so our criminal justice system is run by the federal government, and most of our DC code felons go into the Federal Bureau of Prisons. So I dealt every single day almost working with the Federal Bureau of Prisons to make sure that our residents who were in the BOP system weren't in California. They weren't halfway across the country. They were close to DC. So having that background, knowing how to deliver for constituents is critically important for this position.
All right. Thank you very much. And now it's time to weigh in with some questions that we received on chat and that we received in the audience here. So the first question is, As a member of Congress, you will be called upon to weigh in on foreign policy issues. I don't believe that Eleanor Holmes Norton got much involved in foreign policy issues, but I may be wrong on that. What is your position on whether this office should get involved in foreign policy issues? And if you do believe that it should, tell me what you believe. What foreign policy issues do you believe are critical to you, and how do you feel about them? Let's start with Robert and work our way down.
As a member of Congress, you will need to get involved in foreign policy issues. I don't think DC's delegate will usually need to be the tip of the spear, but when things that are happening that are wrong to humanity, you've got to say that they are wrong. What's happening in Gaza is wrong. The military presence in Iran is wrong. I can't even tell you why we're there. And we have to say these things. DC residents do fight in these wars and die in these wars, but we don't have a vote as to whether or not we go to war. So sometimes DC's delegate will have to get involved in these debates to use the little power that we have to move us in the right direction.
I am primarily focused on the real and urgent and immediate problems that DC faces. And I know from the research that DC voters want their elected officials to focus primarily on our own very real problems. We are under attack by our own president. We have the National Guard and ICE rolling into our city, and we need help with that. As a member of Congress, I am certain I will be called upon from time to time to weigh in on foreign policy issues. But I will say, even closer to home, what happened to us with the DOGE cuts affected our national security. It decreased our national security. It decreased our safety. So where we sit in the world, the changes that happen to our city are making the whole country less safe. So that's my area of focus. DC needs people focused on us, on our problems, on our challenges, and that's where I will spend most of my time.
Thank you, Trent.
So the DC delegate should absolutely weigh in on foreign policy because we're 700,000 residents just like everybody else. And our member of Congress should weigh in on those things just like every other member of Congress. And Congresswoman Norton does weigh in on those issues. And I would point out too, foreign policy is a great area to again make the case for DC statehood. We've had our residents have fought and died in every single war since the American Revolution. And we can use those types of things to point out their historic service and give their praise, but also point out that we did all this while not having a vote in Congress, while having our laws overturned. And the other thing too is we have our DC National Guard as well that gets involved in these issues. I've worked on DC National Guard issues for the past 8.5 years, and we have our own unique challenges with those. So for example, the federal government has tried to claw back some of the pay to our National Guard members, and we fought that every step of the way. So it's important to have a delegate who knows that background, that experience, and can weigh in on day one for all these critically important issues for DC.
Greg.
Yeah, well, I would say I think these issues are not isolated. So foreign policy issues often have important implications for the district. Obviously, the war in Iran right now is already exacerbating a cost of living crisis here in DC. So it's raising gas prices and may potentially raise electricity prices as well. So you can't escape even the district implications for foreign policy issues. So certainly as those issues come up, the delegates should be, in particular, with a focus on how they impact the district. I think that's really the key, is that you want to be involved, especially when there are district impacts. As far as issues, I do think the war right now is a significant issue that I think, in particular, with the impact on nuclear proliferation throughout the world. Quite frankly, that's an issue that I'm an international recognized expert on. So it's an area where, if I can be helpful both in educating the Congress as well as then helping to ensure that district residents are shielded from the implications of the war, then that's certainly something I would weigh in on.
Okay, thank you. And now I'd like to turn to gun control, which is one of my favorite issues. There's a representative from Texas has just introduced a bill on April 15th to restore and protect the Second Amendment rights of residents and United States citizens who visit the District of Columbia by modernizing our firearm laws, eliminating prior restraints on acquisition and possession, establishing concealed constitutional carry, prohibiting feature-based firearm bans, and facilitating lawful purchases through federally licensed dealers in neighboring states and for other purposes. The text is not yet available. How do you intend to protect DC from congressional interference in our gun laws? Robert?
We've got to fight back against the gun lobby. I mean, look, they took out our vote in the House, but worse than that, look at the devastation that happens in DC from firearms. I'm not going to try to go to Texas and tell them what their gun law should be, but don't come here and tell us what our gun laws should be. These folks care more about guns than the children that are losing their lives on the streets, and that's not okay. So we've got to take on the gun lobby because, first and foremost, of human life, and second of all, because those fools have gotten in the way of our basic democracy before. So we've got to take them on completely.
Yeah, I mean, just in the last week, we lost a 12-year-old boy. We lost a 14-year-old boy to gun violence. In the last 48 hours, there was carjacking and 2 shootings within the same 2 blocks. Like, this city is suffering. And Robert is totally right. We can't have legislators from Texas who have their own issues with guns, but they can't tell us what to do and how to keep our people safe. So it's yet another example of the legislative autonomy we've got to fight for. And let me say one last thing. When I was counsel to Attorney General Janet Reno, America saw the largest and fastest drop in crime that had ever been recorded in U.S. history. And a big part of that was gun violence prevention and measures to control the flow of illegal guns. So as a country, we know, and we've gone backwards since then. Some of the laws we passed at the time have been repealed. So we know as a country how to do a better job at this. And we have to restore sanity. We have to win back the House and Senate, and we have to restore sanity on this issue.
So this is yet again another traditional home rule matter, and we see the dire consequences of not having that home rule whenever Congress tries to meddle with these critically important issues. And it's also, as I mentioned several times now, we work to get over 100 national organizations to endorse the DC statehood bill, and some of those organizations are like Brady and Giffords, those types of organizations, because they realize how important this is for the things that they work on. And so this issue, just like every other issue, it's about forming national alliances and allies on this issue and to help make that state for statehood. And this is just one more reason that we need to be the 51st state.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with everything that has been said here. I think we recognize there's an education issue involved in getting constituents in these districts to understand what their members are spending their time on and how these issues impact the district fundamentally, and they are sovereign issues that you would normally associate with the state. So, yeah, as I said, I agree with everything that's been said here, and I think on a lot of these issues we share a common united front, which I think is great.
Okay, and here's a yes/no question. Would you support the elimination of the filibuster in the interest of DC statehood? Yes or no?
Yes.
Carve out.
At least a carve out.
No.
Okay, well, that's it for us. And thank you to our.
Hey, can I explain that?
No.
Okay. That was not a yes or no question.
It was a yes or no question. That's it. Okay, so we have one dissenter here, but I think we can all agree on one thing as a result of this debate, that none of us like those traffic controlled cameras. I think we can. That's something that came out of this debate. All right. Well, thank you very much. You want to say some concluding remarks? Oh, I'm sorry. I blew it. You all get a closing.
Excellent.
So let's go. 30-second closing. Thank you very much. Sorry about that. Robert, and then we'll end with Greg.
Thank you again for hosting this. I am a native Washingtonian, worked for years as legislative counsel to Congresswoman Norton, worked for our Attorney General, and have spent the last better part of a decade representing our entire city as an at-large council member. I have a unique knowledge of the power of that seat. We need someone in that seat in this time with this president who knows what they are doing on day one, who knows this city on day one, and who has a record of having a backbone to stand up for this city. So I'm asking for your support. I'm asking for your vote, and I'm looking forward to celebrating winning the House and making DC the 51st state, which is something that we have the opportunity to do right now with the right leader. I want to be that leader for you. Thank you again.
Eleanor Holmes Norton won this seat 36 years ago. And in that time, she faced really no serious opposition. So I did the math. That means that 80% of today's DC voters did not vote in DC the last time this city had a serious conversation about what this delegate job is and who should fill it. I do not think it is a stepwise promotion from DC Council. I also don't think it's some kind of figurehead or insignificant. It is a very specific opportunity for this city, and it requires someone with deep national relationships across the Hill and across the business community nationally, so that we can defend our rights and rethink our economy to be less dependent on the federal government. I'm the only one in the race with both of those, with deep relationships built over decades across Capitol Hill and deep relationships built over decades in the private sector, the nonprofit sector, the foundation sector. And I want to bring all of those strengths, experiences, and networks to fight for this city that I love. So thank you for being here, and I ask for your support on June 16th. I look forward to being your next delegate.
Well, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for hosting this important forum. Elections are about contrasts, and the contrast in this race could not be clearer. This race is not like a position for any other member of Congress, since you're fighting for autonomy and fighting for statehood. And it's definitely not a DC Council position where you're only working with fellow Democrats on local issues. This is working with 435 full voting House members and 100 senators, including Republicans and even moderate Democrats, who will do everything they can to overturn our laws and block our progress. So the time right now is too important for politics as usual. I'm the only candidate in this race with the necessary serious federal experience to deliver for DC on day one. So I'm asking for your vote. Thank you.
Again, my name is Greg Yatzko, and I am running because we need to push back on the Trump administration and protect the district. And I have shown over my career in government, both on Capitol Hill, where I worked on both the House and the Senate side, and leading an executive agency, that I have the experience to know how the system works. And you need to couple that with bold ideas for progress. And I think my idea to focus on income taxes and withholding income taxes is a bold way to reset the discussion about DC statehood, because that is the #1 civil rights issue that we face in this city, that when we address, we'll deal with so many other problems that we deal with. So the delegate can focus on dealing with wealth inequality in the city, on crime disparities across this city, in a way that will ultimately achieve a better prosperity for everyone in the district. Thank you. And I should say, vote for me and rank me #1 or #2 on the 16th. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you again, all of our candidates, and Brooke for showing up today, and to our wonderful journalists. We hope to see you back for Meet the Press, and I'll turn the program over to Lisa.
Again, I want to thank everybody for coming. My name is Lisa Liebau, and I'm the co-chair with Angela Parson of the DC Affairs Community Steering Committee. I think thanks again to the candidates, including Brooke, who joined us for a bit, and to our journalists. We have some upcoming events, including Meet the Press that Jim mentioned earlier, that will be taking place sometime in, excuse me, my timer's going off. I guess I went over my minute.
We don't get red cards.
No, I should hand it to you. But Meet the Press will be sometime in June or early July. So please keep an eye out for that. Join our community so that you get those notices on our listservs. We also will have an event regarding the DC budget coming up. And looking forward to the fall, we will have a whole new slate of opportunities to engage with our local government. And I hope whichever one of you is representing us before Congress will join us for further programs to introduce you to the community at large. So thank you all for coming. And if you have any questions about the community, feel free to catch me. I'll hang around a little bit. Take care.